Okay, what's up, guys? We've got Casey back again, performance dietitian, and he's going to drop many more knowledge bombs on us today. We're going to be talking about the supplement industry in particular. Of course, when you're thinking about nutrition and ways to get better, obviously people are thinking about nootropics and supplements, things you can take maybe in pill form or otherwise to have a positive effect. So this episode will be kind of targeted around kind of creating that foundational knowledge about the supplement industry so that you're informed. And then the plan is to go, I think, more in depth over time as people, as you guys also give me feedback. What do you want to hear Casey talk about? Do you want to hear him talk about any supplement in particular? Do you want to hear him talk about any pharmaceuticals in particular? We're going to try to hit everything we possibly can. So with that said, Casey, thank you for joining me once again. And yeah, the supplement industry. What do we need to know? What do us plebs who have no idea need to know?
Yeah. So yeah, first off, thanks for having me again. I always enjoy our conversations, both on air and off air. And yeah, it gives me a platform to just kind of rant about stuff that I really enjoy. So, truly thank you.
Yeah.
But yeah, supplements is something that's very near and dear to my heart. Having worked in the supplement industry for some time, and also, my research publication was examining a specific supplement product in elite League of Legends players. So, like that is my research base. I worked in supplements, and then I'm a gamer myself. So, I like to experiment with different supplements, and then I'm a dietitian. So I got to experiment with different supplements. So I just, I love the idea of what can we take to, essentially min-max our diet on top of whatever else we're already doing. And specifically, is there a way to leverage something else to get an extra edge? Right. It's just it's kind of the natural competitiveness in me to try to just leverage whatever I can for any possible potential edge. And supplements is a place that a lot of people gravitate to. And just to kind of lay the groundwork before I even talk about supplements, I want to put this big glaring disclaimer in front, which is simply, I'll probably say it twice. There is not a single supplement that exists, not a single one that exists that can overcome a detriment in some lifestyle pillar that you have. So if you are not sleeping enough, you're sleeping 4 hours a night, there's no supplement that can overcome that. If your diet is trash, there's no supplement that can overcome that. If your hydration is trash, there's no supplement that can overcome that. If your social situation, your stress situation, all this, there's no supplement out there that can overcome a detriment in a fundamental area. So you really should be thinking about a supplement. Honestly, it's kind of in the word, right? A supplement is if you say oh, I'm doing this to supplement something, I'm doing this to supplement my education, my whatever. It's not meant to be a replacement for. It's meant to be in adjunct to or addition to something else, right? And it's not meant to replace something. And I feel like a lot of gamers and a lot of individuals, just in general, they're looking for that little quick fix. They want something that's just I hope that this one thing is the problem, the source of all my problems. And if I just take this one thing, then everything's going to suddenly get better. It's the magic pill, right? And unfortunately, those don't exist. If they did, some company would be making trillions of dollars right now. But the reality is that doesn't exist yet. I got my fingers crossed. Maybe it will someday. But right now, that's the reality. And so I do just want to emphasize that when we're talking about supplements, you need to really make sure that you're approaching this in the context of where you are in your own, competitive performance health journey, and only approach it after you've got everything else taken seriously. A supplement can maybe give you a couple percentage points of an edge. So it's oh, I went from 100 to 101 or 102%. That's cool, right? If you're at the peak of your game and you need that, that's really cool. But if you just fix your sleep, you might be going from 70 to 90% or something, right? Those, you're going to be rewarded far more by focusing on the fundamentals first. So I just want to put that big disclaimer out there, just because if this is, kind of the evergreen piece that sets the stage, I want that disclaimer to exist. And I want to say, please focus on your fundamentals first. And then we can, now rightfully potentially move into the conversation about supplements. That all okay?
Yeah, absolutely. We got that out of the way with, and now we can kind of jump into the portal, the world of supplements.
Yeah. So okay. So the first thing I'll say is there's really three key features of supplements that should be considered before you even decide that you want to take a supplement. And the first one is simply the legality or the ethics of this particular supplement. And in certain, in traditional sports, we have these governing bodies that dictate what is allowed, what's not allowed. And I have started to see that drug tests in esports are actually becoming a thing. It's not ubiquitous, but I have seen that there, some competitions and things have done drug tests. And so I don't know that there's like a universal. Well, there isn't. There isn't a universal governing body for esports, and they probably will defer to just whatever the country of origin's anti-doping agency says. In the U.S., we have a bunch of ADAs, anti-doping agencies. WADA is like the World Anti-Doping Agency. USADA is United States Anti-Doping Agency, and so on. And so they have this published list of supplements and products that are just not allowed, right? And then there's also like actual legal. Some supplements are just straight up like illegal to consume. Usually those toe the line as being maybe more like a pharmaceutical, but at one point some of our supplements have gone from being something you could buy to this is actually illegal to take, with like criminal consequences. So that should very much so be considered. And I bring this up because just yesterday, actually, someone sent me a product to review, and I think I mentioned it to you. I think I mentioned it to you the other day. But someone sent it to me, and the funny thing is, actually there's a compound in this particular product which is banned in Australia. So, like, if you're an Australian athlete looking to take this, this is a compound that's actually banned in Australia. So it's really interesting because you have to do your checks here, and just because maybe it's legal in America doesn't mean it's necessarily healthy or good for you. Our standards are sometimes different from other countries, and sometimes some of the other countries are a little bit up to snuff on potential consequences for these things. And you could probably speak to some of this too. Like, I'm sure you've seen different legalese around like different food compounds or like additives and things like having worked in dietetics, I know like in the EU, there's a lot of different regulations there. Have you seen any of that? I'm curious.
I have in the past. Yeah, nothing comes to mind right now. But yeah, when I was, especially when it comes to like the bodybuilding world, especially there's a lot of products that were really popular in the US. People wanted to get a hold of in the UK because they couldn't get it in the UK otherwise. So they'd have to try to like find some way to do it because those substances wouldn't be allowed. And and even stuff like that's also interesting. And actually, maybe this is another topic for another time. But high fructose corn syrup, for example, is regulated out of Europe, and obviously that's something that's highly subsidized in the US, making it highly cost effective for companies to promote it. But obviously it also has health implications. So that's another more common example, I suppose, of something that's a little bit less like, oh, you can take this, it's not going to kill you, but there are reasons why some countries may decide not to have it.
Yeah, and so I think this is really interesting because especially with gamers being a relatively global endeavor, right? Like esports is global, but what gets marketed to these gamers is sometimes being housed in one country and being transported to another country. And supplements is the perfect example of this because you might have some of these products that are being advertised in like Asia or something, but they're being produced in America. But sometimes these companies, they don't know that something that they put in their product is illegal in, say, China, but it's legal in USA. And then, someone over there, just very innocently says, oh, I want to buy this product. I saw my favorite, pro team is using this product, or my favorite streamer or whatever is using this product. I want to use it. They buy it, and they don't realize that it actually has stuff in it that is either just not allowed in esports at like the doping level, or illegal in the country that it's actually being transported to. So some of those things are something you should be on the lookout for. You don't have to be a master in this. There are published lists, but at a minimum, ask some questions about it, especially if you see like a supplement with just like a list that's like this long and you don't know what it is. It might warrant some closer look. At a minimum, maybe reach out to me and I can help you out and let you know if whatever supplement is allowed or not. So that one is kind of cut and dry. Like, that's consideration one, is it actually legal? There are published lists. There are these things. It's somewhat tedious to check, but it is something that you probably should check. That's something that should be considered that usually gets overlooked. A lot of people ignore this. The second thing that people should consider is the safety of the product. I think this is a huge one, and a lot of people don't actually think that this is a big one, but I think it's a big one. Being a dietitian, I care very much about the health of the players, and I do think that health is a prerequisite for performance. So a lot of times we silo these out and we're like, oh, what can I do to improve performance? Well, if your health is just not at baseline health, then you should focus on that first, right? Like you got to correct that first before you can perform. You can't have a soccer athlete on a broken leg, right? You got to fix the broken leg first, and then you can talk about performance strategies. So safety is a huge one, and one that gets very, very regularly overlooked. And a lot of times, what may be safe initially can very quickly become unsafe when you have an inappropriate dose or when you compare it with something that it has a negative reaction with. And anyone who's done like elementary school chemistry can tell you that sometimes two inert compounds, when you mix them together, they can have, crazy consequences, right? You mix baking soda and vinegar. Alone, they're fine. You put them together, boom, you have this, big geyser, the volcano eruption thing, right? Similarly, depending on what you're taking, your supplement stack, if you're taking one supplement and you're taking a whole host of other supplements, just adding one in, there's a potential for that to interact negatively with these other things and cause some health consequences. And this is really hard to know, but it means that generally, if you're serious about taking a supplement in the long term for any measure of time, like you should consult a physician or a pharmacist or something, or like a dietitian sometimes, to see if there's any negative interactions potentially with either your existing medication regimen or with your existing supplement regimen, because you don't want to have that crazy side effect. Because there are some compounds that it's less common now because they've weeded out a little bit more of them. But back in like the 90s and 2000s, especially in bodybuilder culture, there were a lot of stimulant compounds that were somewhat fine by themselves, but when you combine them, they started, people will be going to the ER left and right, and that's why a lot of those get banned. I'm thinking of like, the old school like ECA stacks that, in the Yohimbe and like all this and that kind of stuff, which you probably know about. But when you start mixing some of these things, there's the possibility for negative safety consequences. So it's just another thing that I think really should be considered that a lot of people don't like to consider with their supplements. And lastly, the real consideration that everybody likes to talk about is simply, does it work? Does it do what you say it's going to do? And this is where I would, at a minimum, consider anyone who wants to take a supplement to do a little bit of digging. The thing, and you don't have to be a master at science to do this, by the way. Like you do not by any means have to be, like a researcher, or you don't have to be hyper intelligent or anything, or know anything about this stuff. Like you can do some due diligence here to see if this actually backs up what they're saying. There's actually a presentation that I like to give to esports athletes, and I took a very common supplement marketed to gamers. I'm not going to say which one it was, but all I did was I went to their website, and on their website they're like, here's all of our peer-reviewed research that backs up all of our ingredients. And it's like, okay, cool. Let's do just like a cursory glance at this. Let's just look at just the titles. Okay, let's look at just the titles. And I threw up like the titles of the research articles. Like I just literally took a screenshot off their website, and I was like, here, look, here's this. You tell me, does this look like it's going to work or not? And it is a very popular supplement. And you look at it, and what you see is, okay, so there's a couple things you could do. One, you could be like, all right, so there's 20 ingredients in here, and they have 5 scientific research articles that they're citing. So at a minimum, we're short 15 articles, right? You don't even have one citation per ingredient. So that's probably a red flag, I would say. Every formula should be well thought out. You don't just mix stuff randomly, but most supplement companies do. They do it for cost and whatnot. But secondly, when you look at those 5 research articles, especially in esports, what you see is the population that they're using is just so different. So like it'll say, oh, this product, like the marketing claim will say, oh, this product is gonna boost your memory. And it's like, okay, that sounds great, right? Like I want my memory to be boosted. That sounds great. And then you go and then you look at their citation, and it's like, oh, this particular supplement at a dose that's 20 times what's in the supplement has been shown to slow down cognitive decline in Alzheimer's models of rats or something. And you're like, All right. So one, the dose is off. Two, you're using a rodent model, and three, it's for Alzheimer's disease, right? Like this is no way is this the same thing as like a gamer, right? Like how can you even begin to think that this is going to work in gamers?
Dude, sounds
And
like I could make a lot of money in the supplements industry.
it's crazy. It's so funny because it's like if you just read the title, you just have to read the title. You don't have to read the article. Like it'll tell you right away. It's like, okay, this compound was investigated in elderly people with dementia. This compound was investigated in people with schizophrenia. And then you just like check at the dose that they used in there, and it's like, is this the dose that's in the product line? No, it's usually not because a lot of these ingredients are very expensive. So it's like, one, is it underdosed, and two, it's in a clinical brain, which you cannot extrapolate to a healthy young individual brain. And so the population is really, 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 really important. And I can tell anyone who's listening here, the amount of research articles that exist where there's a particular supplement or dietary compound that is given to a healthy young esports athlete, very small. Very, very few studies. Like it's probably less than 10, though it's growing. It's very, very tiny. This is a very understudied population. And so, in fairness, if you're designing a research or if you're designing a supplement, there's no research here to rely on. But it should be somewhat parallel, right? Like if you're measuring reaction time, don't measure reaction time in a 90-year-old. Measure, compared to the reaction time that was measured in, like a 20-year-old, right? Try to get as close as you can to the target population. And in esports, usually in esports, it slants young male is the typical demographic. And so you would want to see somewhat close. At a minimum, it should be healthy and youngish. You don't need to have like a perfect one-to-one, but I want to at least see a healthy young person being studied before I say that that's a valid comparison. If you have a clinical brain, if you have a rodent, none of this stuff is going to translate, okay? None of this stuff will translate over to humans. So that just like really, really, really bugs me when I see that. And they cite these things and it's on their website. Like it's just literally right there. And no one decides to fact check them. So that's something that I would encourage people to do big time. And I don't know, have you seen this? I don't know if you've done any digging yourself into any of these products. Like, have you come across that?
I never did any digging because I always stuck to kind of like the basics, and the only thing that I really looked at would be creatine, and that's just good for literally everything. So
Yes.
it's kind of a no-brainer to be honest.
Facts.
But also the other thing is that, and I think this was like one of the very first questions I asked you when we first spoke, had our first call when we were working together with 100 Thieves, and I just joined as the GM, and I was like, well, so your job is to optimize the performance through nutrition, but I feel like I don't even know, or I don't feel like I've seen anything that's particularly conclusive that can even quantify what is cognitive performance when it relates to esports. Like, what does that actually mean? Like, memory is pretty easy because you can, with memory, it's especially if we're talking about, let's say you have a certain kind of mental decline that's happening for a certain like population group, like you were describing. Okay, well, that's probably pretty easy to measure that because it's more obvious. But in esports, everything's actually, the edges are all very small. And as you say, you're in a very healthy population. So it's going to be very hard to even get perhaps like good data if you did studies anyway. And then on top of that, it's very clear that we don't understand what's happening in the performance. And esports is like very new as a thing. It's like 20 years old. So it's not as, it's not as huge as something like as football or something like that. So this is not as much money in it. So there's you have less of an audience that you're even trying to optimize or wanting to get a market share of for a product like this. So there's all these like reasons why we're probably very far away from even having an answer to those questions. So that's why I'm like, oh, you know what, I'll just kind of just do the stuff that we have lots of data on, like creatine is really an obvious one. We can definitely talk about that at some point. But yeah, so that's kind of where I've stood, and I don't know if you have an answer for that question. Exactly, but yeah, there we go.
Yeah, no, you said two things in there that are really, really actually very astute, like incredible observations. The first one is at the truly high performing level, at the truly elite, right? Like if we're looking at the top 1%, top 1%ers, by definition, they are not the center of the bell curve, right? Like you aren't here in the big old middle of the bell curve. You're at the very end. You're an outlier, right? And to try to investigate that is very hard. One, because the population itself is very tiny, right? Two, a lot of their features are already close to their ceiling. So like their reaction time might already be close to its, genetic or physiological potential ceiling value. And so any investigation that you do into this, the change, the delta is going to be very tiny, right? And the population size itself is very tiny. And every single person who did make it there likely has some kind of outlier-ishness about them. That means that whatever worked for one pro is probably going to be very different for a different pro. And what I mean by this is, like in traditional sports, as an example, there was an investigation into some cardiovascular type athletes, and what they found was that some athletes had this very unique mechanism that enhanced like red blood cell production, and then they had another one that enhanced the carrying capacity of their red blood cells. So one had more of them, and one had a greater capacity. Two different mechanisms, but it led to the same thing. But because of that, it's very different physiology. And it meant that you couldn't necessarily extrapolate like one potential strategy and the other. So like, for example, the person who was making more red blood cells, they could not do a doping strategy because they were already capped out. And if you gave them more red blood cells, they're going to explode. Like they have too many already because they're already leveraging that strategy. So similarly, when we look at the elite of the elites, usually you are unique, you are an outlier. And to try to pull what worked for you, it's likely going to be very different from someone else. Again, going back to the traditional sport realm, there was like a standing offer for a biopsy of Usain Bolt's leg, like his quad tissue, for like millions of dollars or something like this. Yeah, and he said no. He would not let people biopsy his leg because a couple of factors. One, he didn't want anybody to get the secret sauce of whatever it was that he had, right? He didn't want anybody to realize what it was because it's his livelihood. And two, more importantly, I guess, he didn't want any injury to come to his leg, which literally was his livelihood. So he was like, yeah. So he's like, no. So what we see is that there's somewhat of a resistance the higher up you go to athletes who want to partake in these highly invasive research studies. Both because one, it could impact them potentially negatively. Imagine telling a pro that they have to go, a pro esports athlete, oh yeah, we're gonna put a little thing here in your spine, and we're gonna get a little cerebral spinal fluid. We're gonna take a little drip of that right before you go out for world championship because we want to see what it looks like in high stress situations. You think they're gonna like opt for like a spinal tap like right before they go out? Like no, they're not gonna do that. So like one, it's really hard to do this research because they don't want to. Two, it's probably not going to apply because it's such a unique individual at the highest level. And three, they're already near their genetic ceiling or physiological ceiling or whatever, meaning that any delta you do see is going to be very small. And all of these are huge. And then another, so there's two directions I want to go with this. One, I want to wrap this thought up. There was I can't remember. I think it was 2008 Beijing Olympics. It was like Cavish versus Michael Phelps. And I can't remember the exact times, but the times were like Phelps won, but it was like 50.89 seconds to like 50.88 seconds or something like that. So like 1/100th of 1 second separated first and second place. 1/100th of 1 second. Like think about that. That's such a minuscule amount of time, but that dictated who got first and who got second, right? Who got all the fame, who was the loser. Okay. And that minuscule change in research, if we were measuring yourself against yourself and we said, Michael Phelps, today you got 50.88 seconds and tomorrow you got 50.89 seconds. Statistically speaking, in research, those numbers are identical. We have no way to differentiate those two numbers in research, short of having like, a 10 million population who are all consistently either getting 50.88 and 50.99. But for all practical purposes, those two numbers are literally indistinguishable in research settings because we don't have a big enough population and we don't have enough people who can replicate Michael Phelps.
Right, makes sense.
So what that means, though, it's very interesting because it's like, in research, and this is where I have a little bit of fun with like doing research into supplements that could potentially help people, is you see this and you're like, this supplement showed that it improved reaction time by 10 milliseconds. And it's like, but it wasn't statistically significant. We have no way to differentiate, the 10 ms or something. Actually, that number is kind of high-ish, but that's kind of the same point. And so, like, for example, if I told Kavish, hey, I can make you 0.02 seconds faster, he would say, hell yes, give me that supplement, right? But in research, that's literally the exact same time. We can't differentiate those two things. So because of all these factors, it's like there might be stuff that could actually potentially help you, but there's no way to detect it in the research. And you might not even be able to detect that it was actually an improvement relative to your day-to-day variance. Because your own natural like biorhythms and hormone fluctuations and, whether you got like 30 seconds less sleep or something, could all impact how you actually do on that particular day. So there's so many factors that go into it that when we're digging into the research to find, does this actually help or not? There's a lot that kind of goes under the radar. It's kind of swept under the carpet because mathematically we couldn't find a difference. But there's a big difference between a mathematical difference and a real life difference, right? As that, Phelps versus Kavish example shows. It's like, because if I told Kavish, I make you 0.02 seconds faster, he says, hell yes, give it to me. I would have won gold that day. I would have had all the fame for the next 4 years. I would have made like millions and millions of dollars, right? He would have wanted that supplement. But in the science, we wouldn't have been able to distinguish those things. So that's a huge challenge and barrier that comes across in research, is because there will be discoveries like that where, especially if you're averaging out multiple people, it's like, okay, well, maybe this one person, frequently when you look at the individual data in research, which I wish they published more of, but more often than not, when you look at scientific literature, what they do is they publish the average. So they say, oh, supplement X caused on average 0 pounds of weight loss. And you're like, okay, so this supplement does nothing, right? And they're like, well, hold up. We tested it in 1,000 people and 500 people gained 10 pounds and 500 people lost 10 pounds. That's very different from saying that, oh yeah, the supplement does nothing. You can't assume that you're going to be zero. Now, actually, if you look at the data and you look at those published data, now all of a sudden you see, oh, there's actually a coin flip here. I could gain weight or I could lose weight, right? But it's not actually zero. The zero is the average number that gets reported to the media and gets reported to you guys. So it's very interesting that they don't publish the individual data too much. And I really wish, because what you'll see is that usually it's a spectrum where some people are responders, some people are non-responders, and some people have a negative response to it. And so that's a huge issue, because then it gets averaged out and then it gets reported. And it's like, on average, you have this supplement will cause a one pound weight loss, when in reality, no one got 1 pound weight loss. Some people got 10 pounds of weight loss. Some people gained weight. So it's very fascinating how it actually gets interpreted from what actually happened in the research with one person to now we do data collection and now we pool all this data and then now we present it to publication and to the public. So I just want to highlight that part too. There's this a funny, do you know XKCD, I think is what it is?
Yeah, it's like a math based kind of comic, right? There's like a lot of math jokes and physics jokes and so on. Yeah.
So one of my favorite, like, please, you go check this out. I highly encourage you to check it. Anyone listening, go check this out. There's a comic, I think it's called like the green jelly bean phenomenon. And so how it goes is like all before I talk about the green jelly bean comic, I have to explain a smidge of science to you. So how statistical science works is we set these p-values, sometimes called like the alpha value also, but these p-values, essentially we'll say, okay, for this research, we're going to set a p-value of 0.05. And what that means is if your p-value is less than this, we usually say that is statistically significant. And if it's not less than this, we say it is statistically insignificant. Okay, so if your p-value is 0.01, that's less than 0.05, we say, thumbs up, you found something that is legit. If it's, say, a p-value of 0.1, so it's higher than the 0.05, we say, no, it's insignificant. And what this actually means in real terms is a p-value of 0.05 means there's a 5% chance, okay, we're setting a 5% threshold. 5% chance that this happened due to a mathematical anomaly, and a 95% chance that this happened because of legitimate whatever the intervention in the study is. Okay, so if you have a p-value of 0.05 and you hit that p-value of 0.05, you're saying that there's a 95% chance that this is a legit result, meaning I gave you a supplement and supplement caused you to lose weight. We're 95% confident that this supplement is the cause of that weight loss. Okay. And we're 5% saying that there's a 5% chance that this is a fluke and it's just a mathematical anomaly or, fancy math footwork. And so some research studies, the classical research studies, like we usually set that 95% threshold. We want a 95% certainty that whatever you found is legit. That sounds pretty good to you, right? But here's the thing. So let's say I run 20 tests. If I run 20 tests, one of those tests is going to be what's called a false positive, okay, with an alpha value of this 0.05. So 1 in 20 sounds kind of bad because a lot of researchers do like 20 tests within the same research study. And so it's like, okay, well, one of those is going to be a false positive. We don't like false positives. So maybe we set an alpha value of 0.01 instead, which means we're 99% confident and we're only 1% confident of it being a fluke. 99 sounds better. There are some research studies that even set like a 0.001 alpha, so it's like one in, I can't even do math anymore, like 1 in 1,000 chance of it being a statistical fluke and so on. But that's what it means. And so in research and a lot of times in supplements, this phenomenon happens all the time. And so this is the green jelly bean phenomenon, which is, public comes to the scientists and says, hey, we have information here that says that jelly beans can, it's like cause acne or something like that. Or yeah, I can't remember what
yeah, that's right. I opened it up. Yeah. Jelly beans cause acne. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So jelly beans cause acne, and then and they're like, okay, let's go test. And so they test, and then they're like, nope, jelly beans don't cause acne. And then they go back to the public, and public say, no, wait, sorry, it's not all jelly beans. It's red jelly beans. And then like, okay, let's go test the red jelly beans. And then they test the red jelly beans. And they're like, nope, doesn't cause acne. And they're like, okay, actually, it's the purple jelly beans. And they're like, okay, let's go test the purple jelly beans. And so they repeat this over and over and over again. And then the green jelly bean comes, and they test the green jelly bean, and it flags positive. And then they keep going. And then what ends up getting reported to the media at the end, after they've done more than 20 tests, is green jelly beans cause acne. Boom. And then the media goes crazy. Everybody's like, oh my God, you got to stop eating green jelly beans. Green jelly beans are the worst thing ever because they cause acne, blah, blah, blah. So the punchline here, though, is that this was just a false positive because they tested so many things. And what you normally see is that there are thousands and thousands of research labs across the United States. Everybody wants to research and find the next big thing in supplements. And if all these labs are looking at some of these different compounds that go in supplements and they test one, there's going to be a random hit somewhere, right? Like if you have 1,000 different labs, they all test the same thing. One of those labs is going to, more than one of those labs are going to test, find, and say, oh, supplement X causes weight loss. Supplement X improves reaction time. Supplement X does this. And if you do a whole panel of cognitive tests, if you test 1,000 different metrics and this is a strategy that some labs do rather than nefariously, is they do what's called data mining. They will intentionally test like 1,000 different metrics. They're like, oh, we're going to do a full cognitive battery. Okay, we're going to test reaction time. We're going to test, psychomotor function. We're going to test like hand-eye coordination. We're going to like they test all these different things. They go through this list, right? Tests you've never even heard of, and they know that if they run this test 1,000 times, that some 5% of those are going to hit as a false positive. Boom! Now they have a publication. And now they can say, oh yeah, this particular product line can do this. They get published, and then now their supplement that they make has a validation study behind it because it got published because of this. And all it really was a statistical fluke.
I saw a story about this a long time ago where someone was trying to essentially reveal just the fraudulency of I guess, like, especially in the age of social media, of this very concept. And so they basically had this thing where it's like, oh, chocolate. They had like a study where it's like, oh, chocolate caused you to lose weight. Basically, was like the thing, and which is quite ridiculous, obviously. But then that got picked up immediately by some science journal, and they published it like straight away, even though it was it was planted to for that purpose to basically prove what you're saying, and that they will just publish. The science journalists will just publish stuff straight away, and again, it was especially because of hey, look, in the social media generation, there's this rush to try to get to stuff really quickly. So you're not going to talk to anyone. You're not going to try to verify anything. You're just going to try to publish it straight away. And, you'll link the study or whatever that no one's going to read, So, and you've got this
Yeah.
headline now, which is fantastic clickbait for you. So it was kind of highlighting this very thing. So I thought it was quite funny. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy, and in the realm, we tend to hold the science up on a pedestal, and coming from the science, I do have a lot of respect for the science. I just want to say that, like on the front end, there are a lot of good researchers and a lot of good scientists out there, but the science industry at large, there are a lot of problems. Okay, like I'll be the first to admit there's a lot of problems with it, and I can have a very lengthy conversation about this, but the main one that I want to highlight here is that there is a positive bias towards research that gets published. So if you publish a study, if you have a study that yields null results, that is seen as uninteresting. And the journal doesn't like to publish it because no one likes to read a null result. It's like, oh, we tested
Yeah.
this and we found nothing. And people don't like to read that. They want to read about the next big thing, right? They want a sensational title. They want like, ooh, we found out green jelly beans are the limitless drug, right? It's like, oh shit, like let's go get that, right? They want to see that. There's a positive publication bias here, and so the stuff that is null tends to get swept under the rug, and the stuff that is revealing in some way tends to get published. And there are these publication mills that run on this. So, so with supplements, we see that, and it's really tough to protect yourself. And actually, I teach some classes on some of this stuff, but I may be diverging a little bit more from my supplements, which I wanted to talk about at large. But within research, the best thing that you can get is if two separate labs get the same result. That's probably the best thing that you want to see to protect yourself from this kind of bias. Is okay, lab one got this result. It's financed completely independently. It's got its own equipment. And then lab two on the other side of the United States doesn't even know lab one. They get the exact same results. That's probably the best confirmation that you can get, is when you have two labs who independently come up with the exact same piece of information. That'll catch my eye. If I see just one, sorry, that doesn't really mean anything. It's there's a high chance it's a statistical fluke. And this is usually what happens, is like kind of this chocolate thing that you're hitting, is like they'll run with it, and it doesn't mean anything until it's been replicated independently. And you have to be really careful about those like breaking sensational news stories, because usually it's just nothing. Rather unfortunately, it's just nothing. So anyway, this is rampant in the supplement industry. And some things that I just want to highlight here is supplements will also do some other nefarious things. So I had an athlete approach me, bring me a big ol' bag of like 50 supplements that they were taking at the start of a season for a preseason eval, and was like, hey, am I taking anything bad here, or do you recommend anything different here? I was like, all right, let me just go through this. I'm just going through all these supplements one by one, and I come across one that I hadn't seen before. And I was like, this is interesting. What is this? Never heard of it. Don't know what this compound is. No clue. And so I was like, all right, let's open up the Googs, right? Like, let's go into Google, figure out what it is. So I'm trying to research this compound, and I find one of the first links is a link to a free research study that I can read that's about this. And I'm like, oh, cool. All right. Published research. That's usually a thumbs up for me. I like seeing that there's published research on this. So I pull up the article, and I'm like, oh, this is cool. And I'm looking at the abstract, which is kind of like a summary at the top, and I'm reading it. It's like, this supplement was investigated in this young, healthy population, and it's basically the limitless drug. They're like, it improved memory, it improved reaction time, it improved like they got bigger, they got a 6-pack, like everything you could think of, it was in there. And I was like, holy shit, this is crazy. Like, I mean, in my mind, I'm like, I wanted it to be true, right? And I'm just like, this is crazy, like this is amazing. I've never. And so I'm like skimming through, I'm like, this looks it looks okay. And I'm like kind of skeptical, and I keep going through, and something draws my eye to the actual journal that it was published in. And I'm like, I've never actually heard of this journal. And I've heard of a lot of journals, like, because I do peer review for journals, and like I'm a published author myself. Like I know, and I read a lot of journals. So I was like, I've never heard of this journal. This is interesting. Let me look up what this journal is. Let's see if they have any other research on this compound, or like any other cool research, because like this is fascinating. And so I did some digging, and most people don't have the strength to do all this digging, but like I was really like in the rabbit hole. I was like, this is crazy. I'm gonna start recommending this to everybody. So I go and I look at what this journal is. This journal uh, opened and closed and only had one single publication, and it was this publication. And I look who made this journal, and it was the people who made a supplement that I was looking at. And what had happened was this was a completely fraudulent study, and they wanted to have peer review to back it up. And so what they did was they couldn't get it published anywhere. And so they made their own journal in which to publish it, and then very quickly just dissolved the journal right after once they had that. And then anybody who looked for their supplement would see first link, boom, got a publication, looks legit, right? So they're hoping no one will do the real fact checking. But this was like a
Bankman-Fried type thing.
It's crazy. I was like, this is a multi-level like scam going on, but I gotta like admire the nefariousness. Like, but yeah. So it was a total scam. But it's like this shows the lengths that people will go in which to get their supplement and make it look credible. And
man, that's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. And so sometimes you can't even trust the science, and there'd be no way for a regular person to even discern that, right? Like no one's gonna also fact check what the journal is. Like I just happen to be, you know. So like that just shows like these people are like they're smart. They're smart in their evilness.
Well, I have a question quickly, because something I used to use many years ago was examine.com. And for those of you that don't know, this is it's kind of like a database. It's supposed to make it very easy for you to like look up supplements or anything in nutrition, any type of like food or anything that will be in a food or supplement. And it will then sort of, you type it in and it will draw up all of the links to the studies that have been done and published to that particular thing, and it'll have like a list of this is what might be linked to, this is where like the interactions might be with this particular thing, and it claims to be a very reliable resource for nutrition. I've never asked you actually, what is this something that, because we're talking about how, like encouraging people to kind of do a bit of their own digging, and I always did it with examine.com. So is examine.com worth using for nutrition information?
The short answer is yes. I am a huge fan of examine.com. I love what they've done. And one of my old professors actually used to be on their team and was helping write their monthly, they had a journal that they were publishing about things, and he used to help out with their monthly journal. So I have some connection to Examine, and I really appreciate what they've tried to do. The problem that I have with Examine these days is they have started to Examine today is very different than Examine 5 years ago, or even 10 years ago. So you mentioned some stuff that you're saying, oh yeah, they give you links to all these research articles and things like that. They don't do that anymore.
Oh no.
Now what they do is everything's behind a paywall, and so they give you like a summary, and then if you want access to like all of their scientific literature resources and like the extra goodies, you have a pay for it. So that makes me a little bit bummed out.
Yeah, I'm just looking now because I used this a lot 10 years ago. 10 years ago specifically was when I used it the most, and it's a bit different.
Yeah. So Examine is still a good resource. You can generally trust it. I have seen a couple of mistakes in there, but for the most part, it's pretty good. Like I would say anybody who is a gamer or who's listening here, I would definitely rather you use Examine than social media for your nutrition information or supplement information. It's definitely better than what you see in the public. There's some nuance, and there's a couple things that I've seen that maybe are a little bit off. And then admittedly, there's a paywall now if you really, really want to deep dive. But for a quick summary of a particular supplement, I think that will save a lot of people some headaches and some potential like health issues. So yeah, I still am a fan of Examine, just with those new caveats.
Gotcha. And I think I interrupted you, so
no worries. So another thing to be wary about with supplements. So one, there is this bias in the research. They want sensational things. There's the statistical anomalies that can flag up. You really want replication before you're confident in the data. Here is something that I have found that people can use. It's a little tip that you can use to weed out the BS. More often than not. So in the bodybuilding realm, for example, here's a string of statements that I've seen a muscle building product use. They'll say, all right, this supplement X is gonna like make your muscles grow or something like that. It's hugely anabolic. You're going to turn into Arnold Schwarzenegger overnight, blah, 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 whatever. Like they basically say supplement X will net you muscle. And then here's what they do for the research. They say there's a compound in supplement X that's been found to be an acute activator of mTOR. And then they say mTOR activation is required in order to increase or to turn on what's called muscle protein synthesis. And then they say you can't build muscle without muscle protein synthesis. You have to, muscle protein synthesis is necessary for muscle growth. And then they'll throw up this like series of research and arguments, and they try to kind of blind you with the science a little bit, like this fancy words like, what is mTOR? Like, what muscle protein synthesis? All this kind of like terminology that most people probably haven't come across. And then they're like, oh, this sounds great. This sounds fancy. This is legit. But the thing is let me ask you this question, actually. Let me ask you this question. And I ask this sometimes to some of my students, actually. I say, if you were to design a study and you wanted to show that supplement X had you build muscle, or supplement X caused you to build muscle, how would you design that research study?
And just for people to understand, I have no idea about how to do research, so it's a great place to ask this question. So
okay,
how
yeah,
do I
so
design the study?
I'm putting you on the spot a little bit. I'm just curious, what would you do?
Well, first of all, obviously, you need to have a control group. You'd have to understand specifically what they're actually doing and have reliable like data on, are they all using the same approach to build muscle, so you can standardize the approach for the building of muscle. Then you need to have a group that's doing that with the supplement and a group that's not doing that without the supplement. The only issue is the problem is that there's individual variance. So you'd have to, I suppose, there's some statistical way to see if there's a statistically significant amount of impact from the control group that uses the supplement that kind of normalizes that or averages out for those that that inherent variance between individuals, which maybe there's already data on, I don't know. And perhaps you'd also have to have like people that are maybe like similar weights, similar similar sex, similar or really the same sex, and just to try to get them as similar as possible so you can minimize that variance. That would be like the first things that come to my mind.
Yeah. Okay. So you said a lot in there, and you actually went way more complicated, which I love, because that is the detail that if we were really actually designing this study, that we would have to go to that level of
Nice.
detail.
I passed class.
So you're passing so far. But my question, so I have one little tiny question to add on to this. So with that, what are you actually measuring? So you said we have two groups, we have a control group and this group, and one has supplement X, one doesn't have supplement X, and whatever the other details. But what would you measure? What would you actually measure?
so I think the thing you'd measure is like overall like you'd because we're talking about muscle growth in particular, and so you wouldn't want to measure strength because you can't. That's not going to correlate, because there's more to strength than just the density of the muscle, but it also depends on the types of movements and all the rest of it. There's also variance there, so you'd want to test for the amount of tissue, like metabolically active, like muscle tissue, and then you'd have to decide, obviously, like what types of tissues are you looking for in terms of the increased amount versus the increased amount essentially.
Yeah. So that's literally what you do, right? You'd have two groups. You'd have one group given supplement X, one group not given supplement X, and you would just measure muscle growth. Right.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what you said, right? You're like, okay, we're going to measure the metabolically active tissue. We're not going to measure the strength. And you just want to see, if they actually accrued any new tissue. And then you'd want to also do your extra check to make sure, okay, is this actually muscle, or did they gain, like more liver or something? I don't know. Right.
Yeah. Connective tissue.
Yeah. So that's basically the research study design, right? And it sounds pretty simple. It's like, okay, we have one group, placebo group, one group, supplement X, pre-post test muscle growth. Did supplement X lead to more muscle growth or not, right? And that sounds very simple. And like you said you have no research background, but that seems like a very easy way to design a study, right? So teams of PhDs for some reason couldn't think of that, because that is exactly what you should do. And instead what they're saying is, there's a compound in here, activates mTOR, and mTOR activates muscle protein synthesis, and muscle protein synthesis activates muscle growth. All this kind of, so what's going on here is one of two things. Well, one of three things. One, they're all total idiots, but no, they're not. They're PhDs, and yeah, some of them are idiots, but for the most part, we can kind of rule that one out. But what's actually going on here is one of two things happen. One, they did the test that we just talked about, where they gave supplement X and it did not help them build muscle. So that's possibility one. Or two, they didn't actually do that study. So it's one or the other. They either this compound either hasn't been done, and they're trying to make it seem like it has been done, but it hasn't been done. Or two, they did it and it was not effective. And so what they're forced to do now is they're forced to come up with this convoluted scientific jargon and reasoning and technical stuff to try to bamboozle you into tricking you to think that that study was actually done. Now, there are other supplements, for example, like creatine, which we both love, which can very clearly put on their label, creatine has been shown to boost muscle growth. Boom. Creatine causes muscle growth. They can even use like the big old cause word if they want to, because the evidence is so strong at this point. But they can put that on their label because it's been done and it works. But anytime you see a supplement that has to rely on complicated scientific stuff that seems, like, oh, they're trying to bamboozle you with their intelligence and like this fanciness. If they have to do that, it means that they haven't actually done the real study, or they did and it didn't work. And you should avoid that supplement.
Interesting.
So that's the quick little trick for you there to know, because there are supplements that if they did the study and they did it and it works, and they put it on the label. If they really did the study and it worked, they would put it on the label. They wouldn't rely on the fancy science.
The other thing here too, which is also applicable, I kind of answered a question recently about this on a different video, where there's this sense of what is actually contributing to the outcome that you're looking for. And what people tend to do is they can often over focus on it's essentially a form of confirmation bias. It's a form of knowledge bias, where you have knowledge of certain things, and so that's you're going to view everything through the lens of the things you have knowledge of. But there can be a larger context, and there's a really great parable, actually, like a Buddhist parable that I just googled so I can share with you guys the parable, as opposed to me kind of just doing it from memory. And it's a Buddhist parable. It's called the blind men and the elephant. Have you heard this one, Casey?
No, this is great. I'm excited to hear.
Yeah. So it's a group of blind men heard that a strange animal called an elephant had been brought to the town, but none of them were aware of its shape and form. Out of curiosity, they said, "We must inspect and know it by touch," of which we are capable because they're blind, obviously. So they sought it out, and when they found it, they groped about it. The first person whose hand landed on the trunk said, "This being is like a thick snake." For another one whose hand reached its ear, it seems like a kind of fan. And as for another person whose hand was upon its leg, said, "The elephant is a pillar like a tree trunk." And the blind man who placed his hand upon its side said, "The elephant is a wall." Another who felt its tail described it as a rope, and the last felt its tusk, stating the elephant is that which is hard, smooth, and like a spear. And in some versions of this, apparently, the blind men then discover their disagreements and then have a fight. So that's great, which I think is kind of nice to touch. But it's the whole point of this is that it's about the limits of perception and the importance of the complete context, and that information that you have can make sense within a limited context. It can appear logical, and so the problem is that how are we to know, if we're onto the right thing or not, if we don't have that full context? And so to bring this back to one thing I was talking to about on a previous video, a lot of people have asked this question about just aim. Why am I I'm missing these shots and putting lots of pressure on myself with aim, and they're kind of very concerned and obsessed with aim, because aim's a very easy thing to see for most people. It's like I've improved my aim, I'm hitting shots, I can hit headshots, and sometimes I don't hit the headshots, and they kind of focus on, well, if I'm not hitting the headshot, therefore the aim is the problem, because that's the thing that has the most direct correlation. But of course, there's a much greater system at play, and if we're even ignoring all of the stuff that is to do with the awareness and the timings and the positioning and the psychology and of actually like how you make decisions and against your opponent and them against you, there's also a greater context that exists in terms of the mental game, in terms of the performance, and then even greater context that is also connected to this, which is like the physiological stuff. So your own variance as a human being from day to day, that is just that, and then also on top of that, the sleep, the hydration, the nutrition, all of these. So you've got all of these systems that are interrelated and connected. So obviously that's really painful for any one person. Any one person would be like, I would like to have the pill that improves my aim. Right. But it's very easy to kind of over focus on these things and then kind of go down the wrong path. So I think this is one thing I wanted to raise in this whole a conversation about supplements, because it kind of goes back to your point of try to do the bigger fundamental pieces correctly, and then you can at the very least do that. And because then this speaks to the idea that, well, if we are taking a supplement, what is it really there to do? And even if it does that thing, well, in a study, you're isolating for that thing. You're not really concerned with how it connects into the greater system at play. And so that's
Yeah.
where something like creatine is really cool, because, as you say, there are like so many good studies around it, so you can more kind of provably create more causal links with these bigger systems and how they interrelate. So yeah, I wanted to just throw that out there because I think it's an important point.
Yeah, no, I love that parable. Actually, I might steal that.
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, um, yeah. I think you bring up another good point, which it is admittedly I don't know how to solve this, but admittedly a very big problem in esports literature, which is simply we don't know what performance metrics are important. We make assumptions, but we actually don't know,
Mm.
because there's a big jump between, okay, my memory is enhanced. That sounds cool. Does that help me play better? I don't know, right? Well, if you're playing a very fast-paced game, maybe memory is not important at all, right? Like if you're just like sitting in an aim lab, for example, it's very much like in the immediate moment is the only thing that actually matters, right? Like you don't need to know where the position was 2 seconds ago. You only care about where the position is right now. So there are a lot of games where memory maybe is less important than in others. Hand-eye coordination, that could be important, right? But let's say now you're a chess player. Who cares, right? You just have to put the piece where it is. Who cares if you have like a min-maxed hand-eye coordination, right? There's all sorts of these cognitive variables where we say like, okay, well, they sound like they would help, or some supplement will claim, oh yeah, this boosts cognitive faculties, but what cognitive faculties, right? And so depending on what they are, it may or may not be relevant to you. And what's needed for a professional League of Legends player may be very different from what's needed for a professional Valorant player. And this is something that I think is something the researchers really struggle with, because they don't know how to tie the broader field of esports together into like one unit that they can actually study, because each title and each type of genre of game usually has different performance indexes that they care about, which makes it really tricky, because then it's like, okay, so we need a whole subset of literature on just MOBA players. Okay, we need a whole subset of literature on FPS players. Okay, we need a whole subset of players on RTS games. Okay, we need it all on handheld console games. All these kind of things. And so it's like that quickly becomes challenging and almost impossible to run. But yeah, the researchers themselves just don't know. And so what they try to do is they try to extrapolate some common cognitive metrics that they hope can filter into every single one of those. And it's really tough because again, we don't know. I don't know, because even when I ask different teams myself, when I've tried to like set up databases and stuff like this, different coaches and different players care about different things. So like I was talking to some league players, and some of them were like, oh, last hitting, very important. You have to last hit really well in league. And it's like, okay, that sounds cool. And then another player was like, oh, mechanical ability, you have to be able to aim your skill shots. Really important, because I'm on a skill shot character. It's like, okay, that's okay. Another player was like, oh, you got to have quick reflexes. You got to be able to, do the quick flash whenever this happens. It's like, okay, so reaction and so you have all these different things, and it's like, it's really interesting even within a game that different people care about different things. So I got to imagine that non-gaming researchers are struggling even more with this. And it just makes it really tricky to pull scientific data, at least.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah. So I've stepped a little bit away from supplements, and I apologize, but I do want to come back. So the next thing I want to say, so they can trick you, right? Like, so they can trick you. There's a publication bias. They can bamboozle you with their words and try to like fool you with those and make it sound like something has happened when it really hasn't. It can be a one-off. It can be a statistical anomaly. All this stuff can happen when you're looking at the research. But let's talk practical. Okay, let's talk actual practical stuff. And so the data that I'm about to mention is coming from United States. I am most familiar with the supplement industry in the US. I am somewhat familiar with supplement industry in different regions, but I can't speak as these numbers don't necessarily apply to every single region on the planet. But so I just want to preface that. But in America, in the United States, the supplement industry is when we look at it, there's some truly shocking numbers that I want to give you. The first one is we've done multiple research studies where we go and we pull random products off the shelf to assess a couple things. One, we can these research studies will assess, does what's in the bag match the actual label? Chemically, is this a pure substance or isn't it? Are there impurities in it? Is it even the things that they say is in here? Like that kind of thing. They'll just assess, does the label match what's actually inside? Okay, seems like it should always match, you would hope, right? But what we actually found is, depending on the study, as much as like 40 to 70% of random supplement products in America, what's inside chemically does not match what's on the label. That number should scare a lot of people, I hope. I don't know, that scares me. Um, so 40 to 70%, the label is wrong.
It's a lot.
That's crazy, right? That's crazy to me. I don't know. So that part. But here
Imagine if you like pour yourself a drink. It was like you want it to be water, and like 40 to 70% of it's just not water, and you're like, I don't even know what this is. I'll drink it anyway, though.
I'd be so mad. Yeah. Well, it's not that 40 to 70% of the product is different. It's that 40 to 70% of products don't exactly match what the label says. So it's like, okay, you said,
weird, yeah.
You said that this was a bottle of 100% water, but we tested it. It's actually only 99% water, and there's 1% oil in here, or something like that. Like that's kind of what
it's really concerning.
Really concerning. And there's thresholds that we tolerate for these things in America too, which is a whole other conversation. I was like, oh yeah, you're allowed to have 0.1% bugs in there. You're allowed to have 0.1% pesticides or whatever. Like there's different thresholds for these things. Which is super awesome, but not really. That's tragic. Anyway, so that's the first point, is like 40 to 70% of the products in America, supplements, what's in the bag doesn't match the actual label. Shocking. Here's what's worse. They've also done tests on these for things that would have you pop on a drug test. So like they would drug test it. Okay, they'd say, oh, does this have any amphetamines in it? Does this have any opiates in it? Does this have, whatever it is? Like they test it. Okay. So random sampling, the numbers range from 10 to 25% of products would have you pop on a drug test. 10 to 25%. Okay. And, maybe you don't care necessarily because you're not getting drug tested, but in esports, drug tests are becoming a thing. But do you actually want like illicit drugs floating in your system against, without your consent? Probably not, right? And this is kind of shocking, because if someone says, okay, Casey said creatine is amazing, I'm going to go buy a creatine, and you buy a 1 month supply and you buy it once a month for the next year, you're going to pop on a drug test at least once with a random supplement of creatine. That sucks. I mean, that's truly tragic. Like,
even my creatine monohydrate is going to have some other shit in it, possibly.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh wow.
There's a 10 to 15% chance, or 10 to 25% chance.
So crazy.
That's the numbers. Like it's really, really bad. If you're taking 10 separate supplements, we're using the conservative number, 10%. We're not going to use the 25% because that's just too scary to say 1 and 4. I'll say 1 and 10. All right. If you're taking 10 supplements, one of those is probably laced with something that shouldn't be. Or if you take one supplement more than 10 months, then you're going to similarly have at least one of those supplements that's laced with something. And
this could be interesting. because I've seen like a huge surge of people wanting to be more natural with what they consume, which is great, and I'm sure that it works, and that's probably something we can actually talk about in the future, actually. But like stuff like this, plus the microplastics and all of that kind of discussion, that like all this random shit that we're like, what are we ingesting? Maybe that's the topic of one video. Like, what is all the random shit we're ingesting that we're not aware of that's in common things? And so I could see that there could be a pretty big benefit to taking that perspective and be like, hey, I'm just gonna like really know what the fuck is in the stuff that I'm actually ingesting. So it's kind of scary what you're saying, because it adds up, because we have a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff that we do consume that is probably going to fit into this category that you're saying, and that's kind of interesting. Because but like one thing by itself maybe doesn't mean too much, but a bunch of things, and then also over a lot of time, now that's kind of getting concerning maybe.
Yeah, that exposure for sure. Time and exposure really, really plays a doozy on the human physiology. So I actually have photos that I sometimes share, but there are some very prominent supplement companies, and well, I guess I don't need to go too much into this, but there are like shocking photos of things that can make it into your supplements. So when we say, okay, well, they said it was 100% creatine monohydrate, but it actually came back as being 99% creatine monohydrate. Is that a problem? Well, depends, right? Depends on what the other stuff is. Sometimes this is non-nefarious on the job of the supplement company. Okay, like sometimes it's just an honest, like some dirt fell in, or some bugs fell in, or something, right? Like their processing center was not very clean, and so some impurity made its way into your product line, but it's still 99% creatine. It's only 1% bugs. No big deal. So sometimes that's like an honest mistake. Other times, it can be a somewhat, I'm not going to call it an honest mistake, but sometimes it can be a negligent mistake. So their processing facility is not up to snuff. And so maybe there's cross contamination between their product lines. So it's like, okay, this was supposed to be magnesium, and now I have some creatine in my magnesium that wasn't supposed to be here because I'm also processing creatine on the same thing that I processed the magnesium with. So then you get some like cross contamination between their product lines. That sometimes happens. That's a negligent issue, because cross contamination can lead to two compounds that maybe together are safe, but together create a side effect. That kind of thing can happen. So we have honest mistakes, we have negligent mistakes, and then we also have intentional adulteration that can happen. And so what is going on here is sometimes the products have an incentive to want to lace it with something a little, little extra kick to get you hooked on it. And the most common areas where we see this intentional adulteration is in our sexual products, like testosterone boosters and things like that, or estrogen products, like any of the hormone stuff. And then also our stimulant products, our pre-workouts, those kind of things. Typically what you see is the sexual stuff, like, trying to treat like erectile dysfunction or trying to boost libido or whatever it is. Those ones are very frequently intentionally laced with actual hormones to boost the actual hormone and give you a better effect. And then the pre-workouts are usually, or the stimulant products are usually laced with intentional actual stimulant, like drugs, like amphetamines or something like that.
Really? Yeah. That doesn't surprise me somehow based on some of the reports I've heard. But
yeah, so basically what I'm trying to say is if you see someone who's like a little too perky at 6 a.m. in the gym, maybe there was a little something extra in their pre-workout. But and I don't mean to make light of this, but it's a very true thing. And the researchers, when they do these studies, they have to be careful nowadays because they used to just publish this list back in like the early like 2000s and things, like a couple decades ago. But basically, what it turned into was like they're like, "Hey guys, we tested all of the products that were at GNC, and we found that these 10 ones had amphetamines in them. Please don't buy these." And what do you think all the kids went and did?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Like they immediately like, oh, thanks for the shopping list, bro.
Yeah.
Appreciate you. So that was not the right approach initially. And so now they have to be a little bit more careful with how they disseminate this information, because it can just lead to problems. So that's a big issue, right? So that's a big issue, and I'll tell you how you can protect yourself from this in a little bit. But what I want to highlight here is the current state of supplements in America. The regulations around it are very different. Supplements are regulated by an entire separate branch of the government than foodstuffs. Okay, so foodstuffs are actually regulated to a relatively high standard. So food must meet very strict quality control guidelines. Okay, if you poison the food supply, government's going to come knocking. They do not want the food supply to be poisoned. If you poison the supplement supply, government kind of doesn't care. It's a whole separate branch. A whole separate branch governs the supplement side. And a lot of the issues that stem in modern day supplements come from this thing called DSHEA that was passed in the 90s. And what it stands for, I don't know. It's like Dietary Health and Safety Education Act or something like that, or maybe I switched one of the letters around. But anyway, this was passed in the 90s, and basically, let me outline for you in America, again, this United States, what supplement industry was like before DSHEA and what it was like after DSHEA. So before DSHEA, let's say DDK, man, you design, DDK is awesome supplement. And it is going to cure diabetes. Okay. And so you are like, I want to make this supplement. I have found a cure for diabetes. I want to go put it on the shelves. It's going to be a game changer for the world. And so what happens is you go to the government and you say, hey, I made DDK's awesome supplement and it's going to cure diabetes. It's going to save the world. And they say, Sounds cool, but what I'm going to need you to do is I'm going to need you to go do some clinical research trials. I need you to really test and make sure that this product is safe, because I don't even know if it's safe. So you're like, okay, that's fair. I need to make sure it's safe. You go a couple years later, you come back and you say, hey, I did all the safety trials. My supplement is 100% safe, and I think it cures diabetes and it's going to save the world. And they say, oh, that's cool. We're glad it's safe. I need you to go do more trials and go test and make sure that it actually does the thing you say it's doing. So yeah, you proved it's safe, but I need to make sure it actually is effective for the thing that you said. You're like, okay, that's fair. I'm going to go back. A couple more years pass. You do some more clinical research trials. You test and you're like, yo, this is amazing. I got it. It's safe. It's effective. Can I put this on the shelf? And they're like, hang on. We got to come check out your facility. We got to go audit all your books. We got to go check everything and make sure that your marketing claims match. Your lab is up to snuff. Nobody did anything shady with the data. All this stuff. Okay. They come. They audit you. This takes another year or so, and finally they say you can go put it on the shelf. Unfortunately, you went bankrupt because 5 years of clinical research trials takes a lot of time. But you got the A-OK to go do that. So that was before DSHEA. Okay, so that was before DSHEA. After DSHEA, here's how it works. You say, I made DDK's awesome diabetes curing supplement. I want to throw it on the shelf. You go ask, Big Daddy America, and you say, government, can I go put this on the shelves? And they say, why the hell are you talking to me? That's it. And you can go put it on the shelf, and there's no check on safety or efficacy or anything. You can put it out there, no problem. You can do it. So let's say you put DDK's awesome supplement out there on the shelf, and some people start dying, and they're dying from your supplement. And it's not until a critical threshold of people are hurt or killed that then the government comes in and says, hey, bro, your supplement's killing a lot of people. I think you're going to have to pull that off the shelf. And you say, my bad. Sorry. Killed a bunch of people. My bad. Cool. And so then what you do is you say, I'm sneaky. I need to make some money. I'm going to close that business. I have all this product, though. I don't want to just throw it away. I mean, it was making me money before. So then what you do is you take that same product and you put a new label on it. You say, this is DDK's Awesome Supplement 2.0. And you go put it on the shelf. And the government's totally okay with this. That's okay. No big deal. It's not until you, again, hurt and kill a bunch of people before they come in and they're like, yo, man, weren't you that guy who was killing a bunch of people before and you just put it out again? And then you're like, you got me. Sorry, my bad. It's okay. I
so
promise
like legal protections from being just utterly just sued into the ground.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. It depends on how you structure your business and things. But the short of it is, it's okay. You'll get a slap on the wrist, and they'll be like, and you'll say, okay, sorry, you caught me. Here's what you now do as a nefarious businessman. What you now do, which is totally allowed and legal, is you go look at everybody else in the supplement industry who is selling a product that is similar to yours or could use yours as one of their ingredients, potentially, because it's just a compound that you found, right? And so now what you do is you sell your product to everybody else in the supplement biz, and they will use that as filler for their own product. And hopefully the hope is now that it's diluted enough that it doesn't kill or hurt people. And so then it gets the same product that was killing people is now being diluted out into other product lines and being used there. And that's how you get rid of your inventory, and you've pocketed a bunch of cash 3 times over.
Very scary conversation.
So that is completely allowed, and that is what happens after DSHEA. And so the reason why DSHEA was passed, so let me talk about why this was passed. You had 3 parties. We can imagine three players in this system. We have the supplement maker, we have the government, and then we have the consumer. Supplement company was pissed off because it didn't like how it had to do so many clinical research trials and all this and that to prove that their supplement actually did what it said it did and that it was safe. It cost a lot of time and money, and they couldn't put their product out on the shelf in a very competitive, admittedly competitive marketplace where supplements are constantly coming out, and any edge you have, speed is of the essence. So supplement companies were pissed off before DSHEA because of all that time and money that it cost. Government was pissed off because of all the audits it had to do. Okay, like all the audits it had to do, all the facilities and the paperwork, and to make sure that these clinical research trials are up to snuff, and then also to make sure that your facility is up to snuff, all this stuff. They didn't like that either. Okay. You were none the wiser. You were just like, oh, I'm having supplements and no big deal, right? These two people, they got together and they said, hey, I hate doing this thing. And they're like, yo, I also hate doing this thing. Let's just get rid of it. And they're like, okay, let's do that. And then the person who gets shafted is you, the consumer. So that was kind of the thing there. It was a win-win for them. Consumers are the only ones who take the L on this DSHEA. So that's kind of the motivation behind it. Like that was why that got passed. It allows them to put a product out there without demonstrating, safety or efficacy, you get shafted. So that's the current state of supplements in the United States. Very scary, right?
Yeah, that is very scary. And again, it sort of further emphasizes, let's try to figure out the basics. And now that Casey's essentially scared everybody to not try any supplements, now that's going to drive more viewership because you guys will have to find out what he thinks is safe. So that's perfect. Good job.
Yeah. And I have some solutions to you, but I just want to go over one other really scary fact. So a lot of times I have a lot of players and they're like, oh, but the supplement is GMP certified, like, and they say they have in a lab GMP certified, GMP this, right? GMP is good manufacturing practices. GMP is the bare minimum legal requirement in which to maintain operation. Okay, this is not a badge of honor. And if you see that on a supplement, it's usually because that's the only badge that they can claim is the bare minimum to be open, which is kind of sad, right? It's a participation award. It's nothing more. It's nothing to be proud of. Sure, you passed the bare minimum, right? Cool, good job. So GMP certified supplements, whatever, does not matter. GMP certified facility, whatever, does not matter. Here's the thing. A few years ago, I believe it was the FDA, they did an internal audit of all the supplement companies that they were, kind of overseeing. Guess how many supplement facilities were in violation of GMPs?
90%.
Pretty high. That'd be shocking. It's pretty close, actually. It's pretty close, actually, though. So
That's
it was
crazy,
it was 70% of the facilities were in violation of GMPs. Another way to say it, over 70% of facilities were unable to meet the bare minimum legal requirements to just maintain opening. But it's cheaper for them to maintain their shitty practices and get a slap on the wrist fine from the government than it is for them to clean up their facility and maintain those standards. They make more money by just standing.
Would this be similar to having like a restaurant and you got cockroaches in the kitchen?
Yeah. Okay. So it's kind of like that, but it's like, okay, well, I have deemed that the cost of an exterminator is more expensive than it is for me to pay the fine to be rated a little bit lower because of this kind of thing. That's basically what supplement companies are doing. They're like, it's right. Cheaper for me to get the slap on the wrist than it is for me to fix.
It seems like there's a lot of this in like the pharmaceutical industry in general, and there is, and I definitely sympathize with the fact that if you want to get good products and you want to get products to market and stuff, there has to be like the economics kind of have to work out. The thing that just is really shitty is that it shouldn't be that the system in place allows the market to kind of be as dangerous in that particular way. Because like you're saying, something that's also concerning to me is the fact that you can't consent to something you don't know. And so you're saying that, quite a large degree of products that we're consuming, probably because of some of these practices, we can't consent to those things that we're consuming, because we don't know what's in there. That's a huge problem. That's a huge issue. So legal issue. So it is really, really tricky for sure, because we also want good products. We want research to be done, and you can't fund the research if you can't get the investment to do so. And if you can't prove that it would be valuable to do that in the first place, and because there's so much like red tape at the same time. So I definitely sympathize with the issues there, but as a very ignorant person, I'm like, there's got to be a better way to do all this.
Yeah, and I agree. I think there's a tremendous amount of like regulation issues here, and it's a lot to unpack. Like I'm not a lawyer or anything, and I'm not a politician. Like I have no idea how even I would go about trying to actually try to solve some of these problems. I mean, I have some thoughts about some things and like I have some opinions about it, but the current thing is like, this is how the environment is right now. This is the current state of the supplement industry. And you as a consumer need to be aware of that. And I feel like a lot of consumers are not aware of that.
There's sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, so in some instances, both legally and in sports, sometimes the the ruling is well, in sports it's 100% always this. In sports, the ruling is you are ultimately responsible for whatever enters your body. Doesn't matter how. You are ultimately responsible for anything that enters your body. So you are liable if you pop on a drug test. It doesn't matter because you are responsible for your body. And that is the ruling in traditional sports 100% of the time. And then that is sometimes the argument for like criminal behavior too. But, if you weren't coerced or, something, then, obviously there's some nuance here in the criminal realm. But in the sports realm, they consistently say, ultimately every single athlete is responsible for whatever enters their body. And so there was actually an instance in the Olympics. I don't know, I can't remember when it was, the Rio Olympics, like down in South America. Do you remember when that was?
Was that
Anyway,
2020?
yeah, I can't remember when it was, but I'm pretty sure it was Rio. But anyway, yeah, so, some time ago, but there was an athlete who was flagged for hormones in their system. And it was because they were eating street food of pigs that had like major juice in them. They were like goaded up on growth hormone and testosterone and stuff. But it was ultimately ruled that it was their fault. Didn't matter that it came in street food. It wasn't even a supplement, right? It was just, I went and had some tacos, and but it was ruled that that was their fault because they did not take better care to protect the food that was entering their body. So, again, this is all just like kind of scary stuff, right? It's like this is what it is.
I can sympathize with why they would have that rule. It makes their lives as the
very
organization
easy, right?
way easier. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I can see why they would. It's obviously not particularly fair, but at the same time, yeah, it's yeah. I mean, yeah,
because it's because then it becomes a he said she said situation sometimes, right? And then it's almost impossible to make a ruling. So it's like
it's I guess super complicated.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's what's going on right now in supplements. And I've been very dreary and I've been very scary. The last thing that I'll say is I actually did this test one time. So a lot of supplements they sell by weight. So I mentioned, there's honest mistakes, there's negligent mistakes, and then there's intentional mistakes or intentional adulteration. There can be intentional spiking or changing of supplements that is outside of simply, I just want to spike it with something good to make you, feel it a little bit better. There's also one other intentional thing that companies will do. So most companies sell by weight. When they're buying, I'm going to buy 2 tons of creatine overseas and have that shipped to me because, I'm bulk making creatine supplements or whatever, right? Like they will buy en masse these huge volumes and weights of these products. And when you sell by weight, that offers a chance for some cutting of corners or for some cost savings in the eyes of the supplement makers. So for example, if you have some very expensive supplement, right? Let's say, supplement X, whatever it is, and you're selling by weight, you can improve your margins by 1% if you just replace 1% of expensive supplement X with sand or gravel or metal filings or something like that, right? It's still 99% pure. No one's going to notice. There's just a little bit of sand in it. Who cares? And you can see shocking photos of like supplements, and like if you pour them out on like a countertop, like if it's powder, you'll see there's like little like flecks of things in there. And you're like, what is that? It's like, okay, well, it's probably dirt or sand or something. And sometimes what companies will do is they will intentionally add some kind of heavy product into it in order to cut their cost savings. And so I did this test once because I saw some photos of overseas labs and they were doing metal filings because the volume of metal is very small, right? But the weight of metal is very heavy, right? So it's a very dense material. So what that means is you can put a very smidgen of metal in there, but it's going to throw off the weight reading quite a bit. So metal is like a common culprit for this. And what I did one time was I took a magnet bar into it was like a NutriShop or GNC, I can't remember. And I just went by the bags and I went like this with it. And on a couple of them, I felt some things on the other side, and I was doing this, and like you could feel the thing on like the metal on the other side moving. I was like, "Holy moly, this is scary!" Yeah. So scary stuff in supplements.
Yeah, scary. That is scary because metal is also I don't know about all metals, but there's generally speaking, I feel like one, it's hard to get rid of metals from your system. You can only get rid of metals through either sweat or your urea, your piss. And there's another way actually to get rid of metals because, for example, if you're eating a lot of fish, which might have a lot of mercury content, don't have to get into all the reasons why, but it has, can have high mercury content depending on like where the fish is in the food chain as well. So if you're having like a swordfish, because it's higher up in the food chain, it's gonna eat a bunch of stuff that has
Yep.
loads of mercury in it, and then so it's gonna have very, very, very high mercury content.
Yeah.
So there's one trick, which is if you cook it with garlic. The garlic actually, I forget what the molecule, but it like helps to like it like binds with the metals or something like
Mm,
that, and allows you to actually just like piss it out much more quickly or get rid of it much more quickly. But some metals are like much more neurotoxic. They can cross the blood-brain barrier, and then they kind of float around your body. And if you're not going to, if you don't happen to sweat or piss them out, they'll eventually kind of be this neurotoxic thing that's in your body that can cross the blood-brain barrier. So it's definitely metals aren't good to ingest. Let's just put it
yeah,
that way.
it's really not, and that is the most common weight filler that gets added to products.
Nice.
Yeah. So, I
Fantastic.
mean, it makes sense though, like from a business standpoint, right? Like why you would want to use metal. I mean, it's the highest density, right? So, it's very cheap to come by. So yeah, now I want to give you the solution, right? Because I just outlined, for an hour and a half, I've been talking about a problem.
Yeah.
And so here's the
Okay.
solution.
Could you just doom
Because
scroll through Twitter for an hour and
yeah,
so
I know,
listen
no,
to you?
everybody can just like, you can like set this little section here for the YouTube video or whatever, and people can just jump here and, they have to listen to my nonsense. But here's what you do. So there are these companies that I will classify in a bucket. I basically call them third party verification companies. What these companies do is they are a third party. They have no financial interest whatsoever in the supplement company that we're talking about. And what they'll do is they'll do a couple things. They'll come in and they will pull random products off the shelf. They will test to make sure that what's on the bag, what's the label, it matches chemically what's inside. Okay. So they'll do that test. Some of these companies will also go the extra mile, especially in the realm of sports, and they will drug test the product to make sure that it's not going to have you pop on a drug test, which I think is, for anybody is probably an important criterion. Uh, so they drug test it, they check that it makes that chemically it's pure and what it says it is. And the third thing they'll do is they actually will go in and they will also audit the facility and make sure that everything's up to snuff in there. That's nice and clean and meeting all the standards and all that kind of stuff. So you have these companies that will do this, and it's kind of doing what the government used to do before DSHEA, but now we have to outsource this to a third party company to do it just to get it done. But
God bless.
yeah. So it's desperately needed, right? Like we desperately need this. And so for anyone listening, so like whenever I talk about a supplement, because I've been approached by so many supplement companies to endorse them and to push them and all this kind of stuff. And I do have favorites, like, I'll just say on the front end, like I do have some favorite product lines, and I can recommend for whatever compound you need. I can recommend multiple brands. I'm like, yeah, all these brands are good. To me, as a dietitian, I only care physiologically about, is it getting the results that I want in my clients? I'm not really here to push one particular product. Like I really don't care. I just want you to get the results that you want, right? So
Except
if I
DDK
say
is awesome, like diabetic pill. Yeah.
except DDK is awesome supplement 2.0.
Yeah, there you
Yes,
go. Yeah.
not the one that kills
Cool.
people, but the other one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it can just be creatine and whatever. But yeah. So with that being said, for me, third party verification is really the hard line that I recommend to my friends and my family. Is like, I want to see that if you're going to take a supplement that is you plan on taking something routinely, like this is going to be part of your diet for any length of time, you should get a high quality supplement, right? You should get one that does this. And there are some caveats to this. So the first thing that I want to mention is, because of this testing process, that cost has to go somewhere. For a company to get third party verification, it sometimes costs like $10,000 a batch to get this done. Okay. That can be cost prohibitive for a lot of smaller supplement companies. Okay. So usually only the bigger supplement companies, the more established one, can even afford to get this extra stamp of approval on their product line. And so that kind of sucks, because I do personally know some people who manage like smaller supplement lines, and they can send me the purity reports, and like I know they're good, but because they can't afford for the official guys to come in and do the thing, they can't get that stamp. So I just want to mention that it can be cost prohibitive to the supplement company, but then also that cost gets passed on to the consumer a lot of the time too. So what you'll see is, on average, supplements that are third party verified do cost a little bit more. So I just want to say that on the front end. if you're going on Amazon and you're just picking the cheapest one, you're probably picking one that's going to have some impurities in it. But also, it should also serve as a deterrent to you taking a million supplements and focusing more on the foundational stuff, because these will start to add up and cost a little bit more. So third-party verification is huge. If you're going to take any supplement for any length of time, or if I'm working with any professional athlete, I always, that is my hard line. It has to be third-party verified. And it's actually very easy to see if a particular product is third-party verified. So I'll mention some companies that do this third-party verification process. And all you have to do, it's very easy. You go to their website and you type in, you're like, I want to buy protein powder. You type in protein powder and it'll pull up a list of every single product that they have certified that is protein powder. That's your shopping list right there. And then you can take that list and then go to Amazon or whatever and buy whatever the cheapest one is, or the one with the cutest logo, or I don't care at that point. But the third-party verification is what I look for. And so the most well-recognized third-party verifier, though it's no better than the others, they have a monopoly in this space, but not to hate on them, I use them all the time, is NSF for sport. So NSF for, not the number, but FOR, for sport. And you go to their website, like I said, you type in protein powder, you type in creatine, you type in fish oil, whatever, and then pull up the list, and it's going to pull up a list of every single third-party verified supplement, and that is your shopping list. The next one is informed choice. It's actually, I don't know what the parent company is, but they have two arms. They have Informed Choice and Informed Sport. It's the same company, but I believe Informed Choice is the US one, and Informed Sport is for more international. So I like using that whenever I'm working with like EU or Australia or Asian. They have an arm for their international product lines that have been certified. So Informed Choice and or Informed Sport, depending on where you live and what you're looking for. Again, same process. Go to the website, type it in, boom, and you'll find what you want. For vitamins and minerals, I like the USP verification. This one has a huge monopoly in it, though. So it's mostly Nature Made and Kirkland, though there are a couple other random brands in there. But for the most part, those companies have muscled out pretty much everybody else. But despite that, USP is the good one for vitamins and minerals. And then the last one that I'll mention is BSCG. I think it stands for Biological Safety Control Group or something. They're relatively new. They only came around in like the last 10 years or so. And this company, this also has like the worst website. It's like really outdated, and it's because it was like some researcher who made this. He actually is a very, very famous researcher, by the way, from UCLA, who made this company, and he actually designed most of the drug tests in traditional sports. Did you ever see Icarus, by the way?
I never did, actually. Yeah, I know what it's about.
Please go watch Icarus. It's so good. It starts out like talking about doping in sports, and then it transitions into just like I'm fleeing the country because I'm going to be assassinated. Like, it's crazy. There's like this middle split where it goes from like documentary to like spy movie.
Nice.
So it's really good though. And it's about doping in sport. But one of the biggest, one of the people who actually created a lot of tests that the doping agency use, like a lot of the drug tests to go back and like test if an athlete is doping, he created this company, this BSCG, to go and test if products are pure. So he's a really smart guy, but the website, the UI, for anybody listening who's probably going to be like the younger generation, or like our generation even, this UI was made by somebody who like grew up in like, didn't grow up, but like was on the internet in the 90s in their peak kind of thing. Like the UI is very poor. It's very tough to navigate, but it's still a quality, product line or quality third-party verification company. And last I checked, actually this might be changing. I think I saw one of the other ones did too, but for a while, I think BSCG was the only one that had a third-party verified CBD product, which was, has been popping off in the last like 5-ish years. Though I do think maybe NSF might have one now, but I can't remember. I haven't checked into that in a while. So those are the ones that I recommend. So NSF for sport is the biggest one. You're going to see the biggest product line. Informed Choice is usually my second go-to. Internationally, Informed Sport. For vitamins and minerals, I go USP. And then if I can't find anything that I want on any of those, not to hate on BSCG, but just because the UI is pretty not friendly, I will then go over there. And anyway, between those, you should be able to find something that you actually want and can use. And then from there, you go buy it, and then you are well protected from everything scary that I just talked about.
Nice. And I think that's a good place to wrap it up, because honestly, we could go into a lot of different places with the different types of supplements, and
Hmm.
because now you sort of have, I suppose, your sense of a better sense of what the supplement industry is like, and how you would really want to carefully select what you choose to use, not just because of does it do the thing that you think that it's going to do, but also because what else is in that, and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
We can then start to investigate all of these different types of supplements. The common ones, I think the fish oil is one I didn't consider, but that's actually another one that's been really is spoken about a lot. There's a lot that concern sleep, or ones that are sleep, but also more generally important, like what are all the different magnesiums, and what
Yeah.
about we can talk about creatine, we can talk about also another thing that I want to talk about is mushrooms as well, because
Mm.
there's a lot of really really great stuff with those, and I think there's a lot of interesting conversations in terms of quality of the ingredients. How do you source quality supplements as well? I think that's really important. So there's lots of topics, and so if you guys are wanting to hear about one in particular, please drop it in the comments, and we'll have a look and see what people want to hear about. So with that said,
Yeah.
any final thoughts, Casey, on this topic?
No, I think we covered quite a lot, and so I appreciate the the patience through getting through that, because I know I'm looking at the clock now. It's been a while, so appreciate anybody who stuck it through. Um, and yeah, if anybody has any question, I'll be really curious also to hear, like, okay, what supplements are people most interested in learning about, and I can do a review of either like a total product line, or how I would probably rather start at the beginning maybe is just like specific compounds to start. It's like, okay, let's look at lion's mane, let's look at fish oil, let's look at magnesium, let's look at creatine, those kind of things, rather than talking about blends, because then it gets really interesting where it's like, okay, not only do each of the individual components do something, and then is like the ratio matter, kind of like the caffeine L-Theanine thing. So it gets a little bit more nitty gritty when it's like, okay, I have 100 ingredients here, what does this actually do together? But yeah, anyway, I'll just be curious to hear what people are most interested in learning about, and I'm happy to give my honest opinion and thoughts on whatever. But
We can
yeah.
probably also connect some of the more holistic elements as to stuff that's going to be more specific to you guys, because people listening to this stuff are mostly going to be gamers, or I would
Yeah.
assume at least are going to be gamers. So how does it actually fit into the context of you with what you're doing?
Right.
The day, the diet, the type of training. Like, is it like we talked about? And actually, to be honest, we didn't talk about placebo. And there's
Oh, that's a
definitely,
huge topic.
yeah, it's a big topic. So so we can
Oh my
definitely
god, I
do.
wish I wish I did actually. Can we talk about placebo next time?
Yes, we can, yeah. Because that came up actually, because we're talking about how we don't know what anything does, and it's
Yeah.
like how hard it is to measure, and it's like, well, it seems like the thing that's actually most important is just that people think that stuff does stuff, which is kind
Yeah.
of an interesting territory to look at, and I don't even know where that is now, because I know that that's always been a pretty hot topic over the last like couple of decades, to be honest.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I'll say real quick, just as like a teaser and spoiler alert, placebo is the best drug you can possibly take. All right. It's the best. It's the best. It's the best. I'm a huge fan of placebo. I believe in it. You should invest in it. Placebos are great. Let's make DDKs placebos.
Nice. That's actually, yeah. That's I'm down. I'm down. Okay. All right. With that said, I will wrap it up, and thank you guys for watching and listening. And yeah, remember to subscribe, comment, and engage with all the content if you're enjoying it. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Cheers.